Okay, so good afternoon. Today I'm going to discuss uh, the last part of the Keynesian model. See, we had started the Keynesian model by assuming that, just as by the standard assumption made by Lord Keynes, that money wages are rigid downwards. In today's discussion, I'm going to relax this assumption so that money wages is now assumed to be flexible. So we had started this discussion yesterday. We know that the classical model assumes that the labor supply depends upon real wages and it is a positive function of real wages. Okay, so NS is a function of W by P, real wages, and G prime is positive. The classical model assumed that workers bargain in terms of money wages, but they are primarily interested in real wages because it is real wages which determines their welfare. So in that case, the question is, why do they bargain in terms of money wages when the primary interest is real wages? The answer is that if they know what is P, the price level, then if they find out what is W, then automatically they know what is real wages. So given P, they determine W such that their target real wages are attained. In the Keynesian model, we continue the assumption that the wage bargain is made in terms of money wages. But the crucial assumption is that workers do not have perfect information. So they, instead of having information about the prices, they form expectations of what the price is going to be in the future. This expectation is based upon the past behavior of prices. So that means the expectation function is something like this. Expected price in a particular period is the weighted sum of prices in the last period, second last period, third last period, and so on. Obviously, this is not a very complicated model, and it is always better to add information. However, the cost of gathering and processing additional information is high, and so Keynes assumes that price expectations are reasonably formulated by this type of model. Okay. Now, we should note that since expectations are backward looking, it means that agents in the current period adjust to past behavior of prices. This implies that there's inertia, the tendency in the adjustment process. That is, price expectations will change with new circumstances, but the adjustment process is very slow. As a result of this, any incident or shock like policy change that occurs in the current economic situation does not have an immediate effect on price expectations. So if there's a policy change now, it is going to change price expectations, but not immediately, sometimes in the future. Therefore, when we are analyzing policy changes, we can take price expectation to be given. Okay. Therefore, the Keynesian supply function is like this. Supply of labor is a function of W by expected price. So instead of price as in the classical model, we put PE over here. But this function is again, just as in the classical case, it is a positive function. So that means if expected real wages increases, labor supply will go up. If expected real wages will declines, labor supply will fall. Okay. Now let us see what happens over here. If the price level goes up, okay, this is the value of marginal product of labor into price. So if price increases, this curve is going to shift outwards. Okay. So as prices decline from P0 to P1 and then P2, the VMP curve shifts outwards. Now, since price expectations are constant, we are going to have the same labor supply functions. There is no change over here. Okay. Now, suppose the money wage is W0. So what we have is, at the price P0, this was the equality of demand and supply. But when prices go up to P1, the demand for labor increases by this amount. So you have excess demand for labor. This excess demand will push up money wages to W1. And employment is now N1. Okay. In the next round, if prices rise still further, again you'll have excess demand, money wage will rise, and employment goes up to N2. Now, when employment increases from N0 to N1 to N2, you can see over here, if you have a production function corresponding to N0, we have Y0. N1 means that we are producing Y1, and N2 is associated with Y2 output. So you can see that as money wages is going up, employment is rising and output also is rising. Okay. So that means P0 is associated with Y0. At price P1, Y1 will be supplied. Price P2, Y2 will be supplied. As prices increases, output also increases. Okay. However, we should also note the fact that in case of the money wage, if the money wage was rigid, then the supply function would not exist. We would simply move from here to here. Okay, so this would have been the amount of labor increased. N1 should have been over here, not here. So that means the employment does increase, but the increase in employment is less than in the earlier model when we assumed that money wages were rigid. So if you're hiring less labor than in the earlier model, that means your output increase is also less. So that means for each, as we are moving up, prices are going up, output is increasing, but the increase in output, each output level is less than in the rigid money wage case. So that means the aggregate supply function that we are deriving now will be steeper than in the rigid money wage case. Okay. So is this part clear? Cool. Have you understood everything? Or should I repeat?
Yes, sir. Understood.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Understood.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So basically the supply curve is unchanged. It is still positively sloped. Only the curve becomes steeper. Okay, this is the only change from the rigid money wage case. That means if there's a change in policy, government spending goes up, money supply is increased, the impact will qualitatively be the same. The only difference will be in a quantitative sense. When the money wage is a variable, a given increase in aggregate demand will cause output to increase, but the increase will be less than in the rigid money wage case. Price level will increase, it will increase more than in the earlier model. Okay, and the simple reason is that you have a steeper aggregate supply function. You can just draw it and see what will happen. Okay. Okay. So over here, money wage is fixed at W equal to W0. And suppose the money wage, the price level increases from P0 to P1. Okay, so that means this is the VMP curve. When price goes up to P1, this will be the new value of marginal product curve. Okay. Okay. If money wage is constant, we can see that employment will increase from N0 to N1. Remember that if money wages are held constant, the supply curve doesn't enter into the picture. Whatever is the demand will be supplied. So that means your employment is going to increase from here to here, N0 to N1. Okay. So if you look at the production function now, your output has gone up from N0 to N1. In N0, the output was this. N1, the new output is now Y1. Clear? In the fixed money wage case, okay. Now, let us see. Okay. Now suppose this is the supply function of labor when money wages is a variable. Okay. So if there's an increase in prices, VMP moves from here to here, employment will increase, but now you can see the equilibrium is over here, the intersection of the new demand curve for labor and the supply curve. So employment does go up from N0, but the increase is less, N prime 1. Okay, so previously the increase was to N1, now the increase is N prime 1. So if you're hiring less labor than in the rigid money wage case, the output is going to go up, but the increase is less, as you can see over here. Rigid money wage, the output was Y1. Now the output has gone up from Y0 to Y prime 1. Okay, so this is Y0. When the prices increase, rigid money wage, the price increases to Y1, output increases to Y1, but now the output has increased only to Y prime 1. So the supply curve is steeper. Okay. Okay. Now, if we compare the three models, the ISLM model, the complete Keynesian model with fixed money wages but flexible prices, and the complete Keynesian model when both money wages and prices are flexible. Okay. So you can see that we are gradually relaxing the assumptions. Here both W and P are constant. This is far away from the classical model. This, however, is close to the classical model. So we are moving closer and closer to the classical model. Okay. So in case of the ISLM model, when wage and price is constant, there is no supply side constraint. whatever you demand will be supplied. If demand increases, output will increase. If demand falls, output will fall. If money wages are fixed, but prices are flexible, then as output increases, okay, so now the supply side comes into the picture. As output increases, okay, you're employing more labor. So what will happen? We are going to move down the marginal product curve. So as you increase output by increasing hiring more workers, the marginal product of labor will fall. So this will lead to an increase in costs as productivity declines. Okay, you can easily check this. Marginal cost is equal to W by MP. We have derived this in the earlier semester. So if MP falls, because it is in the denominator, marginal cost is going to go up. So cost of production is going to rise. So the output will be supplied, a higher level of output will be supplied, but because cost of production has gone up, it will be supplied only at a higher price. Therefore, the aggregate supply curve will now become upward rising. So here in case of the ISLM model, the aggregate supply curve is vertical. Sorry, it should be horizontal. Sorry, I made a mistake over here. Okay. So in case of the ISLM model, aggregate supply is horizontal. Demand is not a problem. But in case of the first Keynesian model, when the money wage is rigid, you have an upward rising aggregate supply curve. So that means you have an impact of a demand rise. But so demand is going to have an impact, but the role of demand decreases. In the ISLM model, whatever you demand, that gives the equilibrium output. Here, the equilibrium output is now determined by the interaction of demand and supply. Demand is not the primary, no longer the primary factor. I think it will be simpler if I remove the word rise over here. Or better still, okay. Now, when we come to the Keynesian model with both flexible money wages and prices, as output increases, the marginal product will fall. Okay, just as in the earlier case over here. Okay, so there will be an increase in cost as productivity declines. So this effect is still there. Now there's an additional effect. The money wage rises. So the cost of production had risen over here. Now the increase in cost is higher. Here you had only one effect through MP. Now you have two effects. MP falls, W increases. So the increase in cost of production is higher. So again, you have a aggregate supply curve, but now to increase the same level of output, you require higher prices. So over time, what is happening is the curve is becoming steeper. So from horizontal, it is becoming positively sloped and it is becoming steeper. So it is gradually approaching as the classical case of a vertical supply curve. And if you have the classical case, as you know, aggregate demand does not have any impact. So we can see that introducing initially price flexibility and then in the final model, wage flexibility brings the Keynesian case closer to the classical model. So from a situation when demand was the only factor, we are now establishing reducing the role of demand and increasing the role of supply. Okay, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. কি হলো তোমাদের? Cat run away with your tongue. Okay. Now, so far what we have done is when we are incorporating supply side changes, the role of demand in determining output changes. Demand is less important. Okay. And if demand does change, there's a demand side shock, then the impact depends upon how steep the supply curve is. Okay, for instance, you can see over here that okay, we have a demand curve over here. Now let us introduce a supply curve. Okay, this is the ISLM case. So whatever is the demand will be supplied. Okay, so it is only demand which determines what is the price going to be. But now look at this. The supply curve has become positively sloped. Now, if demand increases, demand still plays a role, but the impact of the increase in demand is less. So let us see over here. So you can see over here that if the demand curve shifts, okay, in the ISLM case, output would have increased up till here, but now output increases over only up till this point. Now let's make the supply curve even steeper. Okay. So if we increase, you can see this is the ISLM case. The increase in output is gradually decreasing. Let me draw two things, it will become clearer. দেখো এইখানে একটা দেখো, I'm going to draw steeper and steeper supply curves. এইখানটা দেখো, দেখো this is the ISLM case. Output, demand increases, output increases. Here the supply curve is slightly steeper, so output increases but by a much smaller amount. Here the supply curve is even more steeper, so again output increases, but how much does it increase? The increase is even less. And finally, if we make it vertical as in the classical case, what is the impact of increase in demand on output? Or nothing, only prices increase. Okay, so you can see that the impact of a change in demand fundamentally depends upon the slope of the aggregate supply curve. The steeper the slope is, the impact will be less. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So the complete Keynesian model shows that if, okay, let me come to the earlier point. Acha. Now, at the same time, we should realize that we have been focusing on demand side changes because of increase in government spending, tax cut, increase in money supply. But we can also have shifts in the aggregate supply curve also. Okay. So you can have changes or supply side shocks which shift the aggregate supply. And this will lead to, so that means the so far what I was saying is that the demand curve was shifting. Now what I'm saying is the supply curve can also shift. Okay, so it shifts like this, or maybe it comes in. You have a negative shock. So this means, okay, so in that case, suppose this is the initial equilibrium. There's a positive supply side shock. You can see output goes up, price falls. If you come from here to here, negative supply side shock, you can see prices go up, output falls. Okay. So you can have demand side shocks, supply side shocks. And now we are going to look at the impact of the supply side shocks. Okay, now the CTM shows that if aggregate demand increases and shifts rightwards, both price and output will increase. This is what we are getting. This is the supply curve. As the demand curve is shifting rightwards, so demand is, there's a positive demand shock, prices and output is going up. Now in the 70s, you had price increases. So prices were going up from P0, P1, P2. But this was not accompanied by increases in output. So output was not going up. Okay, if you look at the figures, see, this is the, you have high levels of prices. Prices gone up from 5.8 to 8.8. So if you look at this model, output should have increased. But what has happened to GNP? It has fallen. The growth is negative. Output increases, inflation increases still further, 9.3. The negative growth rate increases, minus 1.2. Look over here, 8.6 to 9.2. You have negative growth rate. Okay. So can we explain this trend that prices are going up, output is falling? This is contradictory to the demand side models. Explanations in terms of demand sides. So if you look at these parts, inflation, price is going up, but output is low or it is falling. We can't really explain this in terms of demand side shocks. Okay. However, if you argue that the aggregate supply curve has shifted over here, then it is possible to explain this. See, what is happening is that you have a negative supply side shock. So what is happening? Prices are going up, P0, P1, P2. And what is happening to output? Output is declining. You have something like a stagflation. Okay. Now, then the question is
Previous slide once.
this one.
Yes, sir.
Finished?
So 1 second, I'm copying the table. Sir, one question. In the GDP deflator, it shows like in the boxed areas that it's not going by a lot. It's not increasing a lot. And in the real GNP, sir, there is a lot of variations that is happening. Sir, could you explain this portion?
No, you mean so you're saying in the GDP deflator, the change is not substantial.
Yes,
That's
sir.
what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
No, I mean, why should it be a huge? Uh, I did show you a diagram, a table, like in Germany in the 20s, Latin America, where the inflation rate was in thousands. But normally, this is what is normally the inflation rate. There's nothing abnormal about it. In any economy, we would expect an inflation rate to be round about a little less than 10%. So that is what is happening over here.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
So the point that I'm trying to make is that if you look at this 5.8 to 8.8, prices have gone up. Okay, if you look at this model, prices have gone up from P0 to P1. This was 73, this is 74. Okay, what should have happened to output in this model? Output should have increased from here to here,
Yes, sir.
but what we are getting is a minus growth rate. So output is actually falling. Y1 is over here. Y 1974 is over here. So we can't explain this using a demand side model. Okay, but if we bring in supply curve shifts, then it is possible to explain this. This is 73, 74, prices have gone up, but look, output has fallen. Okay,
Yes, sir.
so then the question is that, okay, what are the factors that shift the aggregate supply curve? Okay. Okay. Now the points on the aggregate supply curve is the output level that the firm wishes to supply for a given price. That is the definition of supply, right? You have a price, how much will you supply? Now, how do you determine this output? How much to supply at the price? So firms try to maximize profit, and this gives the condition price equal to MC. So this condition will give us the output which I want to supply at this price. Now let us look at the marginal cost. This is the increase in cost due to production of an extra unit. So if output goes up, how much does cost go up? Okay. Now if you have a single variable unit, labor, all other factors are fixed. then how can you increase output? Only by using more labor. Okay. Q is a function of N. So if you want to increase Q, you have to increase N. Now, what is the marginal product? What is the slope of the marginal product curve? It is negatively sloped. So that means if you increase labor, okay, so if you increase labor, what is going to happen to marginal product? It is going to fall from this level to this level. Now, marginal cost is equal to W by MPN. So if MP falls, the denominator is falling, what will happen to marginal cost?
It rises.
It will rise. Okay. Now, if you consider the flexible money wage model, if you increase the demand for labor, you're employing more labor, what should happen to the price of labor, that is wages?
So rises.
That should also rise.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what you see is this is this part is, the denominator is falling, the numerator is rising. So what will happen to marginal cost? Simple mathematics.
So even more, yes, sir, rises.
Yeah. Okay, so if marginal cost increases, right, it means that you are going to ask for a higher price level. Okay, you can look at it in two ways. One is you will say that, okay, for the same price, I'm going to supply a lower output. Or alternatively, you can say, I will supply the same output, but only at a higher price level. Okay, so any factor that causes the marginal cost curve to shift for the same output level will cause an outward shift in the, an inward shift in the aggregate supply curve. Okay, you can see over here that the marginal cost goes up, shifts up. So what will be the price? Remember MC equal to price. So
Yes, sir.
price is constant. So what happens to output? So instead of the equilibrium here, you have the equilibrium over here. Output falls from Y1 to Y2. Right?
Yes, sir.
So this is what we are getting over here. For the same price, output will fall. Or you can see for the same output, you are willing to supply the same output, but now at a higher price. Your costs have gone up. You want you want a higher price. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now,
So
why
could
will
you take some time to write?
let me finish this and I'll come back. Okay.
Sure, sir.
Let me finish this slide. Why will marginal cost shift upwards? One is the cost push factors. Right? Remember that when the workers bargain, they consider the expected price. Okay, suppose this expected price goes up. They receive updated information and they believe that there's going to be an inflation in the future. So in that case, they will want, when they are bargaining for wages, they will say that, okay, I want higher money wages so that their purchasing power is not affected. Logical? Don't make it complicated. Just think that you are a worker. You expect prices to go up in the future, right? So what will happen? For the same money wage, your purchasing power decreases. How to prevent that? You will push up the money wages. You will want higher money wages.
Yes, sir.
Now, if you use, see, the production function that we had used was, let's see, Q as a function of N. Now, if we extend the model and assume that there are other variable inputs, raw materials, for instance, particularly oil, energy, these are very volatile, as you will see. So if there's a change in their prices, then the marginal cost curve is going to shift up, right? So what can happen is, look at this carefully. See, what we have is, you have a demand curve for labor. The supply curve of labor depends upon your expected prices. Over time, you believe that expected prices is going to go up. So you shift your prices, supply function will shift over here. Okay. You're supplying the same amount of labor N1 at a higher money wages. So what is going to happen is, if your supply function shifts upward, money wages will increase, but a smaller, fewer number of workers will be employed. Employment falls from N0 to N1. This is the production function. Output falls from N0. You are producing Y0. Output is now N1. You produce a lower level Y1. Okay. So what happens is, for the same price level, see, the price is still P0. For the same price level, your aggregate supply curve shifts inwards. Okay. This is expected price was P0, this initial prices. You receive updated information. The supply curve now becomes this one. Okay, so the price expectation, so the initial effect is through the raw material price, a change in the raw material prices, but you can also have a second round or lagged effect occurring through a change in expected prices. So the supply side shock operates in this way.
So could you show the next slide once? I have a question. So could you explain the graph B once with respect to A?
Graph B is the easiest. Look, what you have N0. Okay, you bring it down. This is N0, right? This is the production function. You just draw the line. This is the output.
Yes, sir.
When employment is N1, this is output. This is employment. This is Y. You're plotting employment over here, output over here.
Okay, sir. So basically, like when the expected price, etc., goes up, then as a result, the real wage decreases, but the worker union.
Not real wage, the expected real wage.
Yes, sir. The expected real wage decreases, but the worker union doesn't want that to happen, so they demand more wages.
Money wages.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Nominal wages. Yes, sir. Money wages. As a result of which, the production cost or the marginal cost of production increases on the firm side, and the supply decreases. So that's why they have to hire less amount of labor as a result, because to reduce the extra marginal cost, or to or maximize the profit. And as a result, they end up hiring less amount of laborers, which results in decline in the output.
Yeah, but you have to bring in this shift in the supply function. The supply function shifts like this.
Okay. Okay.
See
So
what is happening. Let me say, I think, see, workers are, if you want, suppose there are N0, N1 workers in the market, suppose. Okay. What is the wage that money wage that they were expecting or willing to work? This amount. Okay.
yes, sir.
When the expected price increases, they will now say that, okay, you have to compensate me by paying higher money wages, this amount. That is why the money supply function will shift upwards. Sorry, I said money supply, I mean labor supply, sorry.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so this is the labor supply, this shifts upward. And then you simply have the demand supply equality, determining output.
Okay, sir. Yes. Sir, could you just slide back to this?
This one?
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, I had an out of context question here, sir. Sir,
Yeah.
sir, MC is equal to W by MPM. Sir, this result we get if we hold W as a constant. Means it will not be allowed to change. But now it is also being allowed to change. So shouldn't this relation change?
Yeah, exactly. See what, see, when we are deriving the relation MC equal to,
Sir, means variable cost is equal to W into L. And
sorry,
sir, so this result we have got from variable cost relation means that C is equal to W into L. And
yes,
now
yes,
we are differentiating with respect to Q, but we are holding W as constant. But if we don't hold W as constant, the relation will change.
yes, but you can have parametric shifts, can't you? For instance, suppose your production, take a Cobb-Douglas production function, okay? Let us say 10 L to the power of half, K to the power of half, okay?
Yes,
So 10 is a constant, half and half are also constant. But is this production function constant? Or can it change sometimes in the future?
yes, sir, it can
Suppose
change.
there's technological progress. What will happen? The 10 can become 20. So I'm saying that A in the Cobb-Douglas production function is constant. But that does not mean that A will never change. So similarly over here, W is a constant as you rightly marked. But over time, we can have changes in W. At a particular point of time, when I'm taking the decision, W is given to me. But that does not mean that W can never change. That will be a very odd picture of the economy.
Yes, sir, I got it.
Sir, I've finished this slide.
So this curve shows that marginal cost has gone up. If you want to produce Y1, you have to increase prices to this level. But if prices are constant, you simply reduce output to Y2. Actually, I think you know by now that the marginal cost curve um, is often the aggregate supply curve in perfectly competitive markets.
Sir, in microeconomics, we have done that the marginal cost curve is the supply curve of the firm.
Yeah.
Is the logic same here?
By and large. Remember that here you're aggregating you're talking about different firms. It's not simply in a microeconomics, you're talking about a market where you have a large number of firms. All of them are producing the same output. Here you have brought in different sectors, different commodities. But the argument holds. I mean, it's equivalent, you can say. Who asked this question? Oishani.
No, sir, Anandrupa.
Acha.
Sir, I finished the slide.
Actually, what you're asking, Anandarupa, uh, is not very easy to answer. Uh, we are talking about the aggregate supply curve of the economy. Okay. So, when you're talking about a perfectly competitive market, you have homogeneous firms. The firms are all coming together, the inefficient firms leave. So, you can argue that MC is equal to the supply curve. But here, you're talking about different products. So, then how can we get the aggregate supply curve? It's not possible just to take the MC and come to aggregate supply. And this is a weakness of the Keynesian model, that there is no micro foundations. We cannot build up the aggregate supply or aggregate demand function from the actions of individual consumers or firms. To some extent, it becomes a black box. In fact, the post Second War criticism of Keynes was it did not have any micro foundations. So, Claver, Barrow, these people, Grossman, these people started to build macroeconomics based on the decisions of individual firms and individual consumers.
Sir, but consumption function had means microeconomic foundations.
Sorry, consumption function.
Sir, this has microeconomic foundations.
It was not. It is not in that sense a purely the Keynesian model, right? It was Andrew Modigliani's model, for instance. Duesenberry's consumption function, not Keynes's consumption function. When Keynes wrote C as a function of Y, he did not explain how this consumption function was derived from individual producers. Okay, so this was a limitation of the Keynesian model, which was addressed by subsequent authors.
Sir, in the class where we had done Say's law, you had showed us the four quadrant diagram for this. So all these graphs that we are doing, like the one in this slide, can it be shown through four quadrant also?
Four quadrant, it is. I don't think so, because why I'm saying, how can you get the? See, you need the ISLM curve to get the commodity demand, and you'll get the aggregate demand curve. But if you want to derive the aggregate supply curve, you need this type of relationship. Okay. See, you can get the relation like this to derive the aggregate supply curve. You can use the ISLM model and get the demand curve. The demand and supply will have to come in the same graph. Okay. So over here, you can put the N. Here you will get the N, but in that case, how can you give the ISLM model in the second quadrant? See, the first quadrant has to be demand and supply, right? You can analyze policy changes using four quadrant, but doing this, deriving the entire model using a four quadrant diagram, I'll see if I can find anything in the textbooks. Often I don't think it will be possible. What will be the if we draw it like this? This is P, this is Y, this is N. Okay. So you can bring the aggregate demand, aggregate supply curve over here. You can draw the production function over here. Here you can have the ND and NS curves. So this will be W by P. Okay. But what will you draw over here? You have to derive the demand curve. You have derived a supply curve from these two quadrants. But here the demand curve is drawn from the ISLM model. So the ISLM model requires the axis should be R and Y. So that becomes a problem. Okay. Anyway, but still I'll check. Okay.
So could you explain this for one last time? This three diagram relation.
This one,
Yes, sir.
the last time in my life.
No, sir, definitely not.
Okay. Okay, just give me 1 minute, please. Sorry, it was very hot. Okay. See, what you have over here is this is the demand for labor curve. Marginal product into prices. Okay, prices are constant right now. Over here, you have the supply function of labor. This has been derived given an expected price level of PE0. Remember, this is expected price. Okay. Over time, what happens is, for some reason, your expected price changes. So you believe that prices are going to go up in the future. Initially, you believe prices would be P0. Now you believe that prices will be P1 when P1 is higher. As soon as this happens, it means if you keep money wages same, you are going to lose purchasing power. Your purchasing power is going to get eroded. So workers will immediately say that we will work but for a higher money wages. So the supply curve is now going to shift upwards, corresponding to the new expected prices. So the supply curve comes from here to here. The equilibrium will shift from this point to this point. You can see money wages has gone up. Your employment falls. Some workers are thrown out of work. From this production function, you can see that as employment decreases, your output also decreases. Okay, from Y1 to from Y0 to Y1. Now, during this entire exercise, has the actual prices changed?
No, sir. No, sir.
Prices are still P0. So that means for the same price level, you're going to supply reduce output from Y0 to Y1. Okay, prices are same. Your output has fallen. This means that the aggregate supply curve shifts leftwards. So this is the supply curve corresponding to the initial expected price. This is the supply curve corresponding to the revised expected price. Is it clear now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Try to draw the diagram yourself. Okay, just draw the curves and see. Just draw this curve and this curve. Find out what is equilibrium, right? Then just blindly draw another curve like this and see how what is happening. Try to work it out yourself. Okay, it will become clearer. Okay, now let us look at an example of a supply side shock. Okay, Keynes thought only in terms of demand, but the latter Keynesians realized that the Keynesian theory had some limitations. We can't just think of demand that works in the depression, but under normal times, we also have to bring in the supply side. And what was happening in the 70s, which you have seen over here, what was it? Where was it? Yeah, this one. This one. What was happening in the 70s can be explained only in terms of supply side shocks. Now, what was the supply side shock in the 70s? The Keynesian focused on what is called oil shock, sharp rises in prices. Okay. So in 19s, look at the oil prices over here. 70, 72. What are prices? Fairly stable. Then you have a jump in prices. It seems very low, but actually it was a fourfold increase. The OPEC, oil producing countries, they formed a cartel and they decided to hike up prices altogether. So there was a sharp increase in prices around this period, 74. Then this 7980, there was the Iran Revolution. The Shah of Iran was thrown out by Ayatollah Khomeini and a new Islamic government was formed. So as you know, Iran is a major oil producing company, and when Ayatollah came to power, there was a lot of uncertainty, as a result of which you can see that there's a sharper rise in prices. So there's a jump over here, a jump over here. Let's analyze this. What will happen? See, what is the meaning of an increase in oil prices?
Sir, inflation.
It means that you are going to have a cost push inflation. Your input cost, oil is one of the major energy sources for production. Your cost of production is going to go up. And not just oil, because you will try to substitute oil by other energy sources, coal, natural gas, etc. So the prices of these items are also going to go up. Agreed? If prices of oil goes up, this is going to have a cascading effect on the other sectors of the economy.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if the input cost goes up, your aggregate supply will increase. Your marginal cost is going to go up, right?
Yes.
So how much will you supply? If you want to supply the same output, you will want a higher price. Okay, like this. So your aggregate supply curve shifts upward. But remember that your expected price is the same. Okay. So the shift from here to here is the immediate effect of the oil shock. Now, if there's a cost push inflation, what are the workers going to do? With a time lag, but still, the
Sir,
workers, their price expectations are going to change. They expect prices to go up in the future. So now, instead of the expected price of PE0, they expect prices to increase to PE1. Okay. So price expectations of workers adjust with a time lag. The new expected price is PE1. What will the workers do in the labor market? Exactly this will happen. Right? What I've taught over here, this is going to happen. Your expected price has gone up, so the aggregate supply curve is going to shift up. And look, this is what has happened. This is PE0. Now, after a lag, you have a second round change in the aggregate supply. So this shift is because of the oil shock. This is because of the revised price expectations. Okay, is it clear?
yes, sir.
Okay, let me finish the oil shock, then I'll come back. You can copy it later. Achha. Now, let us look at it 1980. What has happened to oil shocks, oil prices? Either stable or it is declining. Okay. In fact, from 81 onwards, oil prices remain volatile even after this. So you can see there are ups and downs. See, after 81, new energy sources became available. So there was a shift away from oil to new energy sources. Simultaneously, the oil cartel weakened. So that means the ability to to increase prices jointly. See, in oil, suppose one country increases prices, the others keep prices same. What will happen? People are going to buy from the country who is supplying at a lower price. So, if you want to raise prices, you should do it together. That is why the OPEC cartel was formed. But the problem was during the 80s, you require a lot of unity. So, if you raise prices, there has to be unity between us. I will also raise prices. All the countries will raise prices. But if you don't have such unity, cooperation, countries may say that, okay, you raise prices, I will profit. I will sell more at a lower price. So in that case, countries will not, prices will tend to be sticky. They will be afraid of increasing prices. So this is what happened in the 80s. Prices, you can see there's a downward trend, particularly in 86. So this is again an oil shock. But now it is a favorable oil shock. So it's the same as this, only the process is reversed. Instead of the arrow moving like this, you now have a movement like this. The first movement, prices, expected prices constant. Now expected prices change. Since prices are falling, expected prices are revised, but now they fall. So try to work it out yourself. What happened in the 80s? Okay, try to do the same diagram as before, the same diagram as this, and try to work out what happened in the 80s. So output should rise now, right? Over here, what has happened? Prices have gone up, output has fallen. But if there's a favorable oil shock, what should happen? Prices should fall, output should go up. And this is exactly what happened. Or rather, what should have happened. The problem was there was recession caused by demand side factors. So prices did fall, but output did not increase, because simultaneously there was a demand side factor also, demand side change also. So try to explain this using a model. What happened? I won't tell you the answer, but try to find it out. Sorry, I made a mistake over here. Then in 1990s, Then in the 1990s, Iraq argued that Kuwait was selling the oil at a much lower price, trying to capture the oil market by themselves. So Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. The oil production stopped from Kuwait. Simultaneously, the United Nations put an embargo on Iraq imports. So Kuwait was not selling. Iraq was willing to sell, but no one was buying from Iraq. So you had a supply side shock. The supply of oil reduced. So now again you have an increase in oil prices and a negative oil shock. So you can see the spike. This is the Iraq invasion. What happened again? You're too young to remember. I think most of you would be just born around this time. How many of you?
Born.
Just born.
Not born, sir.
Not born.
10 years back. Almost 12 years back.
Yeah. You would be 30 now, working. So what happened was the United Nations invaded Kuwait, and they won. They captured Kuwait. They managed to liberate Kuwait. And so the oil prices recovered back to the old levels. Okay. answer. So afterwards, you had, look at this price. The oil prices were fairly low. So this meant that European countries, US, you had low inflation over here. Then in the 21st century, again you can see that oil prices started to rise. There was a dip, low prices over here, after which oil's prices started to rise. So what will we see on the price and output scenario? You are going to have cost push inflation, and this is going to lead to supply curves shifting. Right? In 2008, this is 2008, oil prices reached the maximum, and then you had the global financial meltdown, as a result of which oil prices fell dramatically. After 2008, oil prices did recover, and the rising cost may be one reason that why there has been global recession, why the economy failed to recover completely after the 2008 crash. Krugman and others have argued that the the COVID did create a shock, but the shock, the global economy had basically entered into recession after the 2008 meltdown. It was still recovering very, very slowly, but by and large, the global economy was in recession. And then the COVID came in, and there was another demand and supply side shock. Okay. So, do you want a 15 minutes break? I have about 5 or 6. This is the last slide. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 slides.
Sir, please continue.
Okay.
So can you give us 15 minutes to copy?
So that means a break.
So indirectly I have to copy it down.
কোথা থেকে বাদ দিয়েছে? এগুলো তো ফ্রয়েডে রয়েছে। কোনখান থেকে ছিল? এখান থেকে না?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I think it will take you about 10 minutes.
Yes, sir.
So if the others want, they can take a 10 minutes break.
So in
But-
this diagram,
Yeah.
the supply curves like output curve like ys, y0s, then y1s. Like there are two y1s written in the diagram. Is it wrong or it's right only?
না, কারণ এখানে দেখো, what is P is expected price. It is PE0,
Yes, sir.
and this is
P1e. No.
Yeah.
Then there are two prices then rising from P0 to P1, but while we are drawing it, there is like P0, P1, and P2, like three shifts.
see the shift from Y0 to Y1, the first Y1 is simply the effect of the oil shock. Expected prices remain the same.
Okay, sir. Yeah, I got it.
হ্যাঁ, আর সেকেন্ডটা হচ্ছে তোমার ল্যাগে হচ্ছে, এক্সপেক্টেড প্রাইসটা রিভাইজড হচ্ছে।
Yes, sir, done, sir. So could you tell me the question that you had asked in this context that we had to work out?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that the oil prices fell in this period. So you have to show this using the complete Keynesian model. What is going to happen? Have you finished this slide?
Yes, I'm writing the question actually.
Okay.
Yes, sir, done, sir.
You can copy this.
Sir, I had a question.
Mhm.
It's a little unrelated to this, but so the question is, like the classicals assume that the output curve is vertical in the long run. So I understand the basis of their assumption, but sir, how is it possible that in the long run output is vertical? Because sir, in the long run, output should always be variable, and in the short run, we can assume that it is a constant because it's not possible to increase output fast in the short run. So like
No, don't think of it as a very long run. Remember one thing that in
Sir, I'm
uh,
trying to join from another device. Can you please let me?
yeah, তুমি আরেকবার ঢোকার চেষ্টা করো তো I'm not getting you. তোমাকে তো দেখাচ্ছে না।
Thank you, sir.
Okay. সরি তোমার কোয়েশ্চেনটা ছিল যে সাপ্লাই কার্ভটা why will the classical supply curve be vertical? Why can't we change the
Yes.
supply curve? আচ্ছা see, the logic is like this, that at any point of time, right, you have a population. Let us suppose the population is 1 lakh, and out of this population you will have a certain proportion who are willing to work. Let us say it's 50,000. Okay, beyond that no one is willing to work. Okay, they are either too young or too old. So this 50,000 is the maximum amount of workers that you can employ. Right? So you cannot increase, if you want to increase output, you cannot increase output beyond this level. Right? Is this part clear?
yes, sir.
Okay. So let us suppose that this is the output corresponding to the 50,000 workers. Right? Now the question is that when will you reduce output? This is not a supply curve right now. I'm just drawn. Suppose the supply curve is like this. What does it mean? It means that at lower prices, you're reducing employment, the number of workers. You're hiring 40,000, 30,000, 20,000 workers. Right? This is the meaning of a positively sloped supply curve. Isn't it?
Yes, sir.
You're reducing employment. So that means you have unemployment.
Yes, sir.
The classical model assumed that there is no unemployment. If you have a situation like this, there's possible unemployment, then the economy will self-adjust. And as a result of this, there will be no unemployment. So that means you're always hiring 50,000 workers. Okay. You can't hire more, you don't have workers, but there's no unemployment also. Now, what is part of the adjustment mechanism is the price. So prices can change. Prices will move up and down. But because you're always hiring 50,000 workers, your output will always remain this output level, the full employment output level.
Okay, sir.
Over time, what will happen is your population will increase, you will have more workers, so the supply curve will shift like this. Okay. But demographic factors takes a lot of time to change. Okay. Sorry, let me finish this. Okay. So now let's start winding up. I've finished a discussion of both the classical model and the Keynesian model. So let's try to put the two models side by side and look at the differences. We are going to look at three issues: the aggregate demand curve, the aggregate supply curve, and then we are going to look at the role of policy. In this slide, we are going to see how the classicals view aggregate demand. See, the classicals focus solely on supply, so they rather neglected the demand side. It did not contain any explicit theory of demand. They had an implicit theory based on the quantity theory of money. So given mv equal to py, if m and v becomes constant, you now have a demand curve. This is price, y is output. So based on this, you can generate an aggregate demand schedule, which will be a rectangular hyperbola. This is price, this is output. For a given money supply, you will have a rectangular hyperbola. If money supply increases, the hyperbola will shift outwards. If there's any increase in demand by one sector, let us say the garment sector, this will not lead to a change in demand. Why? Because interest rate will stabilize the economy, will stabilize the demand. You will simply have a shift in the components or composition of demand. If G goes up, you will find that C will come down, as a result of which your aggregate demand will remain unchanged. So, it is only the monetary factors, an increase in money supply or an increase in the velocity of money, which can shift the aggregate demand curve. Clear? Keynes, on the other hand, the Keynesian theory was demand centric. Aggregate demand, the slope of the position of the aggregate demand curve was determined by G and T, which are policy variables, and the autonomous part of investment. Money supply also plays a role. So if there's any change in these factors, G, T, I, autonomous I, then there's going to be a shift in the demand sector. Okay, the interest rate will again try to stabilize, but the difference is from the classical model is that interest rate changes cannot fully insulate the economy from the effect of such shocks. So in the classical model, if there's a demand side shock, the interest rate will change in such a manner that the shock is eliminated. Here, the shock can be reduced if interest rate changes, but you cannot fully eliminate the shock. So there will be increase in demand. In fact, Keynes argued that such demand side shocks will play an important role in the cyclical fluctuations of the economy. In the last sem, you covered the multiplier accelerator model. Remember, MD taught you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So what was the multiplier accelerator model? It was trying to, there was, I don't remember the exact condition, but there was in one case, you had cyclical oscillations of income. Remember, there was one case.
Yes, sir.
So this is the case on which Keynes is focusing. That if you have positive demand side shocks, you're going to have upswings. The economy is going to boom. Then you have a negative shock. So the economy is going to plunge into depression. Again, you'll have a positive shock. The economy rises. So you have oscillations, trade cycles, business cycles. And the destabilizing factor, what is causing this cyclical fluctuation is private investment. And how can you, and see, these cyclical fluctuations create a problem in the economy. So the government, what happens is, for some reasons, the investors, private investors, change their expectations. They anticipate that the market is going to boom, so they will invest more and the economy is going to rise, or they believe that there's going to be a depression. They reduce capacity investment and the economy plunges into depression. So in order to control them, you need counter-cyclical policies. We'll come to this later. Okay, so is the demand side difference clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you have crowding out. Remember this part, I'm explaining this line. You have crowding out, but the crowding out in general is not perfect. In the classical model, however, you have perfect crowding out. One component increases by 10 units, the others will fall by 10 units. Now let's come to the aggregate supply curve. Again, the classical assumption was that what I've just explained, that it is vertical. The labor supply and demand depends upon real wages. You have perfect information about real wages, and money wages will adjust, equating demand and supply of labor. Okay. So at any point of time, you have a supply of labor, the money wage will increase or decrease so that demand is always equal to supply. So the 50,000 workers will always get employed. Now, what are the implications of a vertical supply curve? Now, output and employment is completely determined by supply. There's no role of demand. If demand changes, the only change is in the price level. Output will not change, therefore, employment also will not change. The demand curve, however, in the Keynesian case is something like this. In the short run, Keynes believed that output is far below the full employment level. So the aggregate supply curve is flat. Money wages are sticky because they don't have perfect information about real wages. They have long-term labor contracts, resistance to wage cuts. They don't want wage cuts because wage differentials may be changed. So wages are sticky. In this case, depending upon the output, depending upon the demand, your output and employment will change. If demand goes up from here to here, as demand is increasing, your output will also go up, employment will also go up. If demand falls, both employment and output will fall. In the long run, however, the factors which are causing wage rigidity become less powerful. the price expectations are more accurate, and so you have greater wage flexibility. So that means you can now attain full employment. And so the aggregate supply curve will now become positive. But Keynes argued, this is a quotation from a tract on monetary reform, we should not focus on the long run. This is Keynes's famous quotation. In the long run, we are all dead. Keynes said that long run means you're thinking about a very long period. You don't know what will happen. So we should focus on only the short run, what is happening in this range. This may happen, but it's too long a period to think about. So the Keynesian focus remained on this part of the supply curve. So now what should be the policy? The classical economists were non-interventionist. They did not favor the use of either monetary or fiscal policy because the economy was self-adjusting. If there is a shock, the economy will adjust by itself, Say's law, and the shock will be absorbed. And anyway, even if the government tries to do something, remember that employment and output is determined by supply. So if there's any policy change, it will lead to demand changes, which is irrelevant. The Keynesians, on the other hand, focused on instability of aggregate demand, primarily due to private investment. They argued that changes in expectations of private investors would lead to cyclical fluctuations in the economy, booms and slumps. And therefore, the focus should be on counter-cyclical policy. If demand was rising, try to curb demand. If demand is falling, try to stimulate demand. Okay, so policy became an important tool under the Keynesians. So, during the 20s and 30s, during the 30s, when Keynes launched his attack on the classicals were routed. Non-interventionist policy was clearly not working in depression. You needed an active stimulant to demand. This influence on policy and academics continued till the 50s. They completely negated the role of demand. They attacked the quantity theory, and they argued that fiscal policy would would stabilize the economy and allow healthy growth. But from the late 50s and 60s, the Keynesian school itself came under attack. The conditions changed, and the Keynesian school failed to explain the new economic circumstances. And during this time, Milton Friedman and the Chicago School launched what was known as the monetarist counter-revolution. So, next week, we are going to turn to the monetarist counter-revolution. Milton Friedman's restatement of the quantity theory and how it changed policymaking.
So, could you show the Keynes versus Classics AD schedule?
Why is there so poor attendance today?
So, next slide, please.
Let me stop the presentation.